Where them fans at, y'all? I don't know, but the boots on the ground decided to boot a secular leaning organization from a pride event. Flabbergasted has a story. Flabbergasted.
Recovering from Religion, an organization that provides peer support and resources for people who are questioning and deconstructing from their religious beliefs, had their attendance at a Pride event in St. John's, Canada rescinded. Recovering from Religion originally had their attendance approved in early June, then a month later, and less than 2 weeks prior to the event actually taking place, they were informed that their attendance was rescinded, citing concerns that Recovering from Religion was not in strong alignment with the focus of their event. In response, Recovering from Religion reached out multiple times to clear up what they saw as a misunderstanding of their intent and mission. St. John's Pride responded to a singular message, expressing concerns with what they saw as combative language and refused to have any direct communication with Recovering from Religion from that point on, and still giving little to no meaningful explanation for why Recovering from Religion was no longer welcome. Despite that, the co-chair of St. John's Pride found time to have an interview with a local radio station once the situation became public, in which they stated that RFR was not part of their community and did not have a connection with their community. Language being used by St. John's Pride had led people to be concerned that RFR was disinvited because their attendance may not have been seen positively by religiously affiliated groups and organizations. This story is from The Friendly Atheist by Hemant Mehta on July 15th, 2025.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we practice stuff. Yeah, I mean,
Stuff
like,
and things.
Stuff and things and stuff. This is insane. OMG. I have to say this because, like, Recovering from Religion is a foundation that partners with the ACA a lot. And I know that we refer to them a lot, especially on call-in shows where people are calling in looking for resources, especially in the process of their deconversion. And, RFR has like great, wonderful different resources that people can utilize in order to kind of help them through the process. I mean, a secular therapy project, also their call-in line that they can do to talk to people who are trained to work with folk who are, going through their own deconversion. And I know that one of the things that really hits hard to me specifically, since I am, part of the LGBTQI plus community as far as like an ally is concerned, and I work with them like in a professional manner as a social worker, I know that, just being privy to people who have, come out to family and friends, and all of a sudden, have been told just because they happen to identify as lesbian, as gay, as trans, non-binary, and the like, that, they have lost homes, they have lost shelter, they have lost, community. And a lot of times, like, coming to a space that is, secular, was more inviting than the ones who happen to be religious. Now, I understand that there are religious organizations and churches and things of that nature who do embrace the LGBTQI plus community, and I'm grateful for them. But if we're going to be honest, that is not in the majority, right? So it's kind of like sad that a organization that has been around for a long time, that has like multiple partners and also resources to help people basically not only come out of religion, but even like come out of the triggers that actually are against their own personal nature, be in this particular space with a point where they're disinvited to a pride event is absolutely appalling. And I do apologize that I had to take some moments to say that, but that was on my mind, guys. I'm so sorry. But no, I'm not sorry. But I just had to get that out. Thank you for allowing me that space. But Flabbergasted, you introduced this segment. So I am curious to get some of your thoughts on this story when you first read it. Could you please elaborate?
So, I mean, yeah, basically it's a situation where a pride event has looked at an organization and has decided at first to include them and then to take that inclusion away. And generally in that kind of situation, you would expect some sort of explanation. And the biggest problem here is that there hasn't been one. There's lots of very good reasons to exclude someone, even if they're a good organization. But the way that it was done is suspect, especially that in a lot of the communication that has been made public, that the language around why they're not included is out of concern of religiously affiliated people not being happy about it. And that's a problem. And then they also talk about things like, oh, well, you're not part of the community. Well, who gets to decide who's sufficiently part of the community? I'm a member of the queer community. And like, do you get to say that I'm not because I don't fit into your bubble? But Bud Light does, apparently, because one of their sponsors was Bud Light. Bud Light is a more queer affirming organization as far as they're concerned than Recovering from Religion. So like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like they're post hoc justifying it to make a particular group or people or organization happy. And that's problematic because no group is more harmed by religion. Well, there's lots of groups harmed by religion, but religiosity harms the LGBTQ community far more than almost anyone else does. There is so much harm caused to the queer community as a result of religiosity. And if you have an organization that focuses on helping people with the trauma that explicitly comes from religion at a pride event, you're like, nah, we don't need you here. Like, are you actually serving the best interest of that community? I would say you're probably not.
I totally agree. I mean, like, we have seen, like, you know, I've participated in a few pride events, especially with another or nonprofit organization that I used to work for, and I've seen, like, you know, the religious zealots gather to say that, hey, you attendees who are LGBTQIA plus affirming or even part of that community are all going to hell. You know, I don't really like, I see this like people like yelling and screaming at you and all this other stuff. And they said, well, the Bible says, and I said, yeah, the Bible also says to dash babies' heads against stones. How do you feel about that? Right. So like let's not even go there about what the Bible says. But you know, but at the same time, it doesn't give anybody credence to be hateful. So like when you actually have like this like a organization that is like geared to really help people like navigate through these particular things, this is like absolutely crazy that a pride event wouldn't even allow them to be there for reasons that make no sense. I don't know. Eli, help me out. What were your thoughts when you actually read this particular article?
Firstly, it was surprising to me that they don't know who RFR is. Because I'm not specifically familiar with any examples of their work, but I know generally what they're about. And I, like the author of the article, would assume that that's exactly who you would want at you know, such an event, because like how many people, and I'm asking genuinely because I don't know, but like how many people are attending their first pride event every year, like after first coming out or after first leaving religion or being kicked out of their home and having their entire like religion and their community and their support network ripped away from them. And they are like literally in a progressing sense, or in an ongoing sense, I mean to say, recovering from religion. And I would think that that's exactly who you would want at these types of events. That being said, pride events aren't for me. Like I've been to one and it was a pretty Gucci time, but like I was there to like support like my friends and my partner at the time. So like I don't form an opinion about who should and shouldn't be there. Right? I didn't form one and I won't. But I think about it like if I was organizing an event for like secular veterans, which is like a label that I would claim, I would want RFR there because I think that they do good work for people that are secular, that belong to any other demographic. So that's sort of where I landed. It seemed to the like organizers that RFR was coming off as a sort of like, do you have any idea who we are sort of attitude, and that's unbecoming of anybody. It's not a good look. But at the same time, like, do they have any idea who RFR is? Like, that's how I felt like reading it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they do, to be honest with you. Like, I think this like a I don't know, like a cursory research would have just been like oh wow, this organization is like really about, you know, affirming people who happen to be part of the queer community. Because I know that they are. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I had like ad nauseum long conversations with Dr. Daryl Ray, and also talked to Gail Jordan and Glenda, her daughter, and you know, like, and I mean, like these, they are super affirming when it comes to, you know, the LGBTQI plus community, and they take a lot of pride in that. So for like St. John's to say no, you're uninvited is like ridiculous to me. But you know, Flabbergasted, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to ask a question,
Mhm.
and I want you to answer, how can communities balance protecting vulnerable members from perceived harm while avoiding exclusion or gatekeeping that may hinder allyship?
Yeah, I think it's just like any other relationship, any good relationship, anyways. It's about communication, right? You can't treat situations like this as a Tinder profile where you just like skim through when you're doing your investigation and skip or pass, right? The kicker here is that the initial communication here really did seem to go well. Like they accepted them, they were excited about it. There was even conversations between the religious organizations that were part of the Pride event and RFR. They were fine. So what could RFR really have done better when they were seemingly ghosted out of nowhere? So like it's when you're asking the question, how do we balance these things? We balance them by making sure we're communicating properly to make sure we understand where people are coming from. If there's, you know, doubt, when sometimes doubt can be valid. And that is actually an issue with RFR, as those who are familiar with RFR knows how affirming RFR is. But if you don't know RFR, that might not be so easy to find out. And that's fair. That's valid. So you have the communication, you have the conversation, you ask them, you look into it. You don't just swipe left or right or whatever one it is on Tinder. I don't know how to spend enough time on it, apparently.
I mean,
Swipe
like,
left.
I left, right? I don't
Left.
know.
Left for no.
Who knows?
Left. Yeah.
Right.
I agree, though. I think
Yeah, go
because
ahead, go ahead.
the organizer that did the radio interview that I think we're going to talk about in a little bit, like he mentioned, like the way he's talking, it sounds like he's just doing his best to protect like queer and trans people in, I think, his local physical community is how I interpreted what he was saying by they're not from our community. So I think it's just true that like he wasn't sure who they were. He would rather, like, the consequences of being cautious and being wrong and like getting a false positive, like just like when our ancestors were watching for predators in the bushes, the consequences of a false positive are a lot more dire than the consequences of a false negative. So I think that's just what it was. Like, if you don't know who they are, just say that. That's fine. Ignorance is no problem. But when you make decisions virtuous of that ignorance, hi, the Vatican, I'm looking at you, that's when we have a problem.
You know, I see a lot of looking at the Vatican. It's a lot, you know.
Yeah.
What's
Almost like it's justified or something.
You know, that part right there. You know, don't get me started talking about Catholicism. I get triggered real quick, like cringy. Anyway, but like, I wanted to ask this question to both of you. Like, Eli, I want to start with you, and then Flabbergasted, I want to come to you. But what does transparency look like? And dialogue play when difficult decisions like this are made in the community spaces, especially during events centered around inclusion and support?
Well, I think that undoubtedly there are people that live in that area that will be attending that Pride event that know who RFR is. And because it was mentioned that they're going to have their booth like off the premises of the Pride event, but still nearby so that people can get in touch with them if they happen to come across them and want to. So they'll still be available, but I think there are undoubtedly people who will be attending that know who they are, and they are going to want to know, they are going to want that transparency about like what actually happened here. Because I agree with Flabbergasted that like it's super strange. If they had initially like denied their request to attend as a vendor because they didn't know who they were, fine. I think that probably would have been a lot less like turbulent if it had just been an outright denial. But they approved it and then came back later and was like, you know what, never mind. And I don't remember when it was mentioned, but it was the idea of being off-putting, I think, to queer and trans-led religious groups that might be attending. They didn't want to be alienating to those groups. And that was like, I think, a primary justification given. So I think the transparency is going to be important. What does it look like? I don't know, because the two versions of the interaction that both RFR and St. John's Pride organizers are telling, these versions are already slightly different from each other. So it's really difficult to tell at this point what really actually was said or happened.
That's fair. What do you have? What are your thoughts, Flabbergasted?
I think whenever we're talking about transparency, full transparency always is the best transparency. And I mean, a pride event is meant to represent the community as a whole. And so you should be able to justify to that community why anyone is or is not included. Especially in a situation like this, right? You should be able to demonstrate and explain thoroughly. And it's interesting because in the article, they say that, oh, well, all of our board meetings minutes are available. We have full transparency. You can go to our board meetings, you can read them. Well, I've read all of their board meeting notes going back 9 months, 7 months, 8 months, roughly. And no, they don't have full transparency. Not only do they not have full transparency, RFR is the only organization that they actually name specifically as a vendor. They mention before they approved them, like, oh yeah, RFR is an organization, do some investigation before approving them. Then they get approved. A month later, they just state RFR had their stuff rescinded. That's it. That's all they said. No justification, no explanation. And they're going to point to their board meeting minutes like they have full transparency. They don't. And that's part of the problem, right? Like if it was in there and there was a justification or an explanation that you could point to and explain and be like, oh, this is why, this is a conversation we had, this is what someone said specifically that made us concerned. They don't have any of that. So what kind of transparency should you have? You should have full transparency, because you should be able to justify these decisions on behalf of the people that you are supposed to be representing, which is in this case, the entire pride, the entire queer community of your area. And you did not provide them that.
Well, check and mate, may I say.
It's almost like I thought about this or something.
Yeah, like something like that. Well, you know, guys, if you're interested, I do have a final reflection about this whole shindig, if you will. So as a secular humanist, we champion open dialogue, inclusion, and freedom of conscience. It's troubling to see an organization like Recovering from Religion, an ally that supports the LGBTQ plus community, excluded from St. John's Pride event without a clear evidence-based rationale, as Flabbergasted aptly pointed out. RFR's mission is not to evangelize atheism, but to offer support to those recovering from religious trauma, something many queer individuals have painfully experienced. Their presence at Pride could have been healing and affirming for attendees, navigating identity and belief instead of the decision to exclude them. It suggests a discomfort with non-religious voices. Even when those voices advocate for equity, dignity, and compassion. Pride is meant to be celebrated of authenticity and shared struggle, a space where all who genuinely support the LGBTQ plus community can come together. That includes people of faith, and it must include those without it. To do otherwise risks replicating the very exclusion that Pride exists to overcome. How can we ensure that inclusion at Pride isn't limited to certain beliefs, but instead extends to all those committed to equality, healing, and human dignity? And I just want to also point out to you, dear viewer, that if you are looking for resources coming out of religion and also need a space where it's safe, And then you can talk to people, especially if you are experiencing exclusion because of non-belief or even exclusion because you're part of the LGBTQIA plus community. Please visit recoveringfromreligion.org. They have resources. They have support groups. They even have a phone line that you can call in and talk to a volunteer, and they can even point you out to other resources that can assist you with navigating the process. And if you, dear viewer, want to navigate through more processes when it comes to our thoughts on things, click here.